to this week's edition of our book club for Star Wars Aftermath Life Debt. There's a little doodad over here you can click on if you want to go back to the beginning of the series. If you're not familiar with the series, basically we are going through this book a couple of chapters at a time, getting into the nitty-gritty, and it's pretty fun. If you would like to, this is actually the second book in the trilogy, you can also click on that doodad, and it will take you back to the playlist for the first book, which is just called Aftermath, and you can kind of join from there if you want. But with that, let's get into what we are going to discuss this week. The very first thing that pops up is the 6th interlude of the book, which takes place on Tatooine. And what I'm excited about with this one, it is one of the interludes that kind of builds this consecutive story. So one of the characters in the interlude is a guy by the name of Cobb. Cobb, we previously saw in the 13th interlude in the first book. He was the guy that went into the Jawa Sandcrawler and shot up the other guy and took the Mandalorian armor. So he appears here as the lawman in Mandalorian armor, going around doing stuff. The other character we get is the character of Malakili, who is the Rancor tamer in Return of the Jedi, the man whose broken heart breaks mine every single time I watch Return of the Jedi. And he's going on through life in this kind of identity crisis because he's a beast tamer with no beast to tame. Jabba's gone, no one has come to replace Jabba, he doesn't really know what to do, he's on this sort of identity crisis. He finds his way to this town is being run by a gang, and Vance Cobb saves his life. And the whole interlude, Malakili is talking about how he doesn't have a purpose anymore, he doesn't know what he's good for, and Cobb basically offers him a job that he can take care of the livestock in this town that they're starting up, and they also have a little baby hutlet, and they want somebody who can help take care of the hutlet. So as I said, what I like about this one is I like that there are certain interludes that connect between all three novels, and they're kind of telling their own mini narrative. They work as narratives in their own right, so if you didn't remember Cobb from the previous interlude in the previous book, especially if you were reading these as they came out, and so there were months in between, and it would be easy enough to forget the name, you know, they still make sense on their own, and they're still really good, but I like that you can then sit down and read the books all together and go, oh, okay, I like following this little story, and it really serves the purpose of what the interludes really do, which is to make this big galaxy feel both big and small. So it feels small because you're knowing all of these different characters, but it feels big because you're seeing all these different characters on all of these wildly different life tracks. And the idea that there's a man trying to establish order on Tatooine, and that's coinciding with everything that Nora and the Aftermath crew are doing, which is all a machination, and what Rax is doing, you know, all of it feels so lived in, and I really like that. Now we go on to chapter 19. Chapter 19 was very short, sweet, and to the point. It's basically Han wakes up, Han and Nora talk. Nora is trying to convince Han to let them help him, as opposed to them knocking him unconscious and taking him back to the New Republic. Han doesn't want to do it. Nora has to, make it seem like his idea, because secretly he does want their help. He's just too Han Solo to ask for help. There's not a whole lot to talk about there other than just Han Solo's characterization. It's fun to finally get to Han. It's something that was so promised in this book, and we don't really get to him to halfway through the story, so it's just fun to finally have Han Solo to go off of in one of these books, especially because so much of these books has been new characters that we're getting to know. To have this kind of legacy character there just makes it different, it spices things up, I suppose. Chapter 20 is another kind of more action than thinking type of chapter. Basically now they are storming Aram's compound, they're trying to get to him. Jazz is sitting there with her slug thrower firing down the droids. She gets jumped by one, the droid setting to self-destruct, she almost dies, but she's saved by Jom Burrell. So Jom has shown up. We don't really know why he's shown up, though. Presumably it's either out of some sort of guilt and his friends running off without him, or perhaps some true feelings for Jazz. Jazz is, of course, struggling with the fact that she seems to have true feelings for Jom, or at least really warm feelings for him, regardless of how deep they go. But then they run down to help storm the base, and Singer's all like, where are you from? And things go from there. They actually get into the base itself, and Aram is running away. He, knocks Han Solo out. He's doing all this stuff, and lo and behold, who catches him? Nora Wexley! Nora Wexley was smart and anticipated where the guy was gonna go. She was on the ship, she was ready. This is like the single most useful, non-annoying thing Nora Wexley has done in a book and a half, and I just want to take a moment to appreciate that she did a good thing. It's just congratulations, Nora. You can see my furnace running by the way my paper levitates. Isn't it nice? Giving Nora a hard time aside, I think this is also largely because Nora's in her element, right? Like she's a pilot. We often see with rebellion pilots that they have to be good on the land as much as they are in the space. You know, we finally see Nora doing what she does best, which is just running around and coming up with wacky plans. So now that she's kind of in her element, we kind of start to see her be able to do more than strange contemplation. Then we hit chapter 21, and chapter 21 is where we hit a lot of themes that I really want to discuss. So Singer is getting ready to interrogate Aram, and he's kind of thinking to himself, and basically he kind of goes through this whole internal monologue, and basically Aram is not human, and therefore Singer is not as familiar with his anatomy. And Singer goes on to explain that because he was a loyalty officer, and because that meant he largely interrogated other Imperials, that means he largely interrogated humans, because the Empire was xenophobic. Now, what I think is interesting about this, and I think I might have actually talked about this somewhere in the Aftermath Prime series, but what's interesting to me about the Empire in current canon versus the Empire in Legends canon is both empires are very xenophobic, and that comes from Palpatine being very xenophobic. And we see that, and that's part of what makes Thrawn so special, is Thrawn is one of the, if not the only high-ranking alien in the Empire. While that is the same, what seems to be different is that the Empire in current canon is distinctly less sexist. Seen through, Sloane has been able to rise to power. She is not the only high-ranking Imperial woman that we see with a lot of prestige. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that men and women are equal in the Empire. I don't think anything in current canon really gives us that impression either. It's just that it's distinctly different. I always had the impression when I was younger, reading Legends, that you had your Izards, you had your Dalas, but they were really, really few and far between, and often only got to power because of family or because they were dating Tarkin. There's only one reason to date Tarkin, and it's not Tarkin. So with Sloane definitely has to fight for power, and when we see her dealing with the Shadow Council, there's a distinct, at least, implication that she doesn't have as much respect because she's a woman, but it doesn't seem weird that she's there because she's a woman either. And I think about that a lot, is why you would make that change. Like, why consciously, and I don't mean that from the Empire, I mean that out of universe, as a Del Rey, Disney, Lucasfilm, whatever, publishing executive, story group executive, whoever made that call, why would you make that change? If the Empire is already supposed to be the bad guys, and they're already supposed to be presumably very bigoted, you already have them being xenophobic. Singer talking when he met Condor earlier in the book, or met with Condor earlier in the book, about how unusual it is that everyone's fine with him being gay, because the implication was the Empire wasn't fine with that. Why would you have those things, but then lessen how accepted women were? Why not just keep the Empire being all around super bigoted? And part of it could be my perception. Maybe the Legends Empire felt more sexist because I was a younger girl and I was more sensitive to it. It's going to sound strange, but it could be a representation issue, and I mean that not in necessarily a progressive sort of thing, but I just think a conscious choice for just something as simple as fans wanting to feel like they're a part of the story, not necessarily as a reader, but even as, somebody buying clothing, somebody being a cosplayer, that sort of thing, that there are women out there who join organizations like the 501st that want to cosplay and they want to be a part of it, and giving them characters who are women like Iden Versio or Ray Sloane that they can cosplay as makes the fan community bigger and better, where something like xenophobia doesn't really impact that because there aren't actual Ithorians on Earth who want to be in the Empire. And if it's more important to you that you cosplay as an Ithorian, you don't necessarily need a specific Grand Moff a Thorian to cosplay as. I'm completely speculating here, but that's just something I kind of thought about in reading these books, that's probably why certain bigoted beliefs stayed with the Empire, but they probably lessened on just this one. Less because it made story sense, even though it doesn't make not story sense. It makes story sense that the Empire would want to move forward anyone they could that had talent. If I had to guess, I think it comes from a place of wanting to give fans out there someone to be, even if they wanted to play as the Empire. I could be completely off base, so if any of you have a wildly different opinion about that, let me know. But that was just something I thought was interesting, and I don't know why that necessarily came across to me. I've just been doing a lot of thinking as to why that specific thing would be different, and it's something I find interesting. Then we get to the end of this chapter, and Sinjir is all freaked out. He's going through another Sinjir life crisis. Timon is still going through whatever life crisis Timon was going through. They sit down and they basically have a if you tell me mine, I'll tell me yours kind of meeting. And Sinjir talks about how he doesn't like who he is and he doesn't know who he can be because he wants to be this good guy, but the only skill he has is hurting people. So he can hurt bad people for the good guys, so other good guys can have information they need or don't have to be the people causing the hurt. And that's a thing he can do, but it's not a thing he wants to do. But he's not sure what other value he brings. And so now we're really getting to the core of what his crisis is that he wants to be someone else, but he doesn't feel like he has anything to offer as a good person. He only has something to offer as a bad person. And that's something that we're going to see play out with his character through the last half of this book and then well into Empire's End. Timon is freaked out. Basically, when he got the idea of all of these Imperial prisons and what a prisoner goes through and how crazy they go, he's getting freaked out because he thinks about his dad and how his dad could still be alive, might not be dead, and could be in an Imperial prison somewhere, and that's the thing that he's struggling with. Just from a structure point of view, I thought this was interesting. Usually, in the past, when we get to the end of a part in one of these books, there's usually like one really big, long chapter that everyone plays a part in. And we didn't really get that. Instead, we got several short chapters that seem much shorter than they've been, at least in Life Debt so far. And they really just kind of broke up the action. And I don't really know why. I feel like that's the type of thing, if I ever got to talk to Wendig, I'd ask him why. And I also feel like that's the type of thing where an author never really has a reason. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I also think it's interesting we've gone a long time without more Imperial Rax points of view. We did hear from Rax last week. We did get some big news from him, but it was really short snippets. Even though there was jam-packed with information, it wasn't a lot of time, and I'm really excited to get back to some Imperial chapters here really soon. Speaking of chapters very soon, I'm going to go ahead and say that's all I really have to say on the topic this week. Next week, let's read chapters 22 and 23. 23 is a very beast chapter. It's very hefty, so we'll probably just leave it at just those two chapters, and we'll be moving forward at a pretty good pace. Please let me know what you thought of the book so far, or what you're thinking about the book so far in the comments. You can check us out on Twitter, out at Port Haven Forums. You can find us on Instagram. You can join our Discord. You can visit port-haven.com for more. Any of those are great ways to kind of find new ways to reach out to us. I love talking with you guys. Thank you so much for joining me, as always, on this journey. I really appreciate what's been going on in the comment section. I see more of you are kind of starting to interact with each other, and we get some really good comments going. So, I don't know, I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for continuing to be a part of this with me. And I will talk to you all next week.